So today we have a little thought experiment. Could your army beat these 5 top Warhammer 40k lists? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where hopefully today we're going to give your toughest list a challenge and look at 5 potential strong armies that you might run into at a tournament. These are hopefully some of the nastier things that you might run into. So we'll go through each in turn, roughly how the army is going to try and beat you, and it's up to yourself whether you think that you have a fighting chance against them. I think it always can be a helpful way of deciding how good your own list is if you think about how it might face up with some of the nastiest threats in the meta today. So without further ado, let's get right into it and meet your first challenger, who happens to be playing Adeptus Auroritus. So here we have the first challenge, a fairly balanced Sisters force, packing a fair bit of scary anti-tank shooting and also a large amount of nasty melee. The core of the list is made up of 3 squads of 5 Battle Sisters, backed up by 2 big squads of Celestians, each with a multi-melter. They'll all be clustering around the Canoness with the Beacon of Faith for some miracle dice, and putting out some very accurate bolter and melter fire while they lock down some objectives. They'll also be next to an Imagifier with Indomitable Belief, and as their Valorous Heart, that means that any AP-1 or AP-2 weapons will count as AP-0. Quite a sturdy battle line for locking up some objectives. Being unleashed just in front of them, we have 3 small units of 2 Mortifiers each. These things are absolutely murderous, only toughness 5 with 5 wounds for 60 points each, but they each pack 2 heavy bolters and a whopping 15 strength 6 attacks in close combat each. They're pretty much a threat that needs to be dealt with quickly, as both their guns and melee are very efficient and pretty general purpose for dealing with whatever is thrown at them. Finally, in the Valorous Heart Battalion, we have 2 units of 5 Retributors, each with 3 Multi-Melters and 2 Armorium Cherubs. They'll either be starting either behind line of sight blocking terrain or in strategic reserve, jumping out for a very scary and very efficient 10 melter shots to take down enemy tanks at range. Then moving on from this, we have a Bloody Rose Patrol, the ones that give the Sisters extra AP and attacks on the charge, and the core of that force will be 2 big units of 8 Repentia, each in a Sororitas Rhino. One will be led by a Canoness with Beneficence, basically a Teeth of Terror equivalent chainsword that makes her very fighty in her own right, and the other will be joined by a Missionary for an extra attack each. Repentia are some of the best combat units in the game per point, and they can pretty much delete whatever they get their chainswords on. Finally, for a little bit of harassment and more annoyance units, we have 2 units of 5 Seraphim, each armed with 4 Inferno pistols. They can either deep strike from the skies, or again use good terrain to advance up the board and get those pistols in range. Overall, the Sisters have a decent amount of melter, 5 fairly scary combat units, and really quite a significant amount of bodies and obsec for securing those objectives. Moving on to the next game, and your next challenger is Death Guard. For this one, I borrowed one of the first Death Guard tournament winning lists, a list by Jamie Beaton, who used it to win the Over the Top GT. The list packs an absolute ton of the nasty stuff from Codex Death Guard. We've got Mortarion leading a significant amount of Terminators, some powerful support characters, a ton of Poxwalkers for objectives and mortal wound surprises, and then a few Demon Engines in support. Mortarion himself, as we know, is a threat that just really can't be ignored. Per point he's insanely resilient, and he'll make short work of anything that he catches in close combat with silence. On top of that, everything within 9 inches of him will be -1 toughness due to contagions of Nurgle, and they'll also not be getting any rerolls to hit or wound from character bonuses via the annoying Warlord trait, the Gloaming Bloat. The main battle line of the list comes from a whole bunch of Terminators. We've got 2 units of 5 Blightlord Terminators, some of the toughest Terminators in the entire game, with a 4+ invul, toughness 5, and -1 to all damage. They'll grind away at enemies both at range and close combat, with a Flail of Corruption and a Blight Launcher. For some serious melee punch though, there's also a unit of 3 Death Shroud. Basically the same, but for a few more points, they have some absolutely murderous general purpose melee power. Leading them into battle is a Lord of Contagion with a Plague Reaper and the Droning. The Droning is the contagion ability that slows enemy movement around him, so if he can make it next to enemy units, then they're not going to be able to maneuver anywhere near as well. Supporting the Blight Lords, there's a Tallyman with the Tollkeeper relic. He makes 1 unit's shooting far more efficient every turn while farming up a bunch of command points, and a Foul Blight Spawn, who as well as packing a massive punch with his Plague Sprayer, also will mean that if you charge 1 unit of the Terminators, you're going to be fighting last. The Poxwalkers are excellent chaff units for capturing objectives, and if they do happen to catch an unwary unit by surprise, they can activate an absolute ton of mortal wounds for 1 CP. There's a couple of Plague Burst Crawlers with entropy cannons that will be churning out the anti-tank fire all game long, and a single Bloat Drone with a Flesh Mower, which is pretty nasty in close combat, but could also be potentially used to deliver that droning trait to enemy units early in the game by using the flash outbreak stratagem. Overall, this list just packs an absolute ton of really tough threats that are going to chip away at your army every turn. Very few lists are going to be able to deal with these tough threats efficiently, so you'd really have to pick and choose which ones you want to try and delete and which ones you want to try and mitigate the impact of. A very nicely built list, it's not hard to see why it did well. I'd certainly not underestimate the impact of having a whole bunch of your units go at really slow movement speeds or losing a bunch of their rerolls. Next up, your next challenger is a Harlequins list. This one's been kept really nice and simple. It's a single soaring spike battalion with 5 units of fusion pistol troops all in Starweavers and then 3 big units of Skyweaver jet bikes to provide some nice haywire fire and an absolute melee hammer blow. One of the linchpins of the list is the Shadow Seer, who has the shield from harm power, which can make everything -1 to be wounded, and it even works on jet bikes with a stratagem, and also uses a stratagem to obtain Veil of Illusion, which will make all your jet bikes 6 inches further away when you try and target them with ranged weapons. This can be really frustrating if you're playing with shorter range firepower, things like bolters or eradicators for example. Leading the troops, we also have a Troop Master with a fusion pistol and the Twilight Fang, an excessively nasty power sword that gets stronger and stronger as the game goes on. Finally, we also have a Death Jester with the Humbling Cruelty pivotal role. This one means that whatever he fires at will have its movement slowed a bit, and also not be able to fire Overwatch for if your troops are charging in. Moving on from this, we have the core of the army. We have no less than 5 units of 5-man troops in Starweavers. They're all packing 5 fusion pistols, which as soaring spikes, you can advance and still fire them at full ballistic skill. That means that all the Starweavers will be able to move 22 inches per turn, and then still hit you with 5 melter weapons at full accuracy, which is usually going to ruin the day of most units in 40k. With this kind of movement, they can be really free with where they deploy, deploying far back out of your range, or all out of line of sight. Between that and the Shadow Seer's powers, it's going to be far harder to take down those skimmers than it really should be. From there we have the other nasty hammer blow of the army, the big units of Skyweavers. They'll do decent damage to vehicles at range with their haywire cannons, and have some solid anti-marine power with those damaged 2 Zephyrglaives in melee. In melee, those Skyweavers can make some solid use of some of the nasty Harlequin stratagems. They can get their weapons up to damage 3 if they want to, or for 2 CP after fighting they can move normally instead of consolidating, meaning they could charge into the heart of an enemy unit that they couldn't hope to kill, hit them very hard, and then run off 16 inches so they can't even strike back. Harlequins can be a really frustrating foe to deal with on the battlefield, and are pretty much masters of getting some of the secondary objectives with the crazy amount of movement and positioning advantages that they have. You're really going to need to try and overextend to catch up with them, and then they can all just swarm around you and kill the units that you've overextended, as they got shot by loads and loads of fusion pistols to the face. The fourth challenger for the day are some Dark Angels, and this one's a fairly even balance between Deathwing and Ravenwing. For the core battle line of the army, we have 3 units of 8 Dark Angels Terminators with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. They're really tough just as they are, but they all have Obsec as well with the Dark Angels Vanguard detachment, and none of your weapons can wound them on any more than a 4+. Basically, aside from mortal wounds, pretty much nothing is going to kill these guys efficiently. To make things even worse, they'll be supported by a Ravenwing Apothecary with the Chief Apothecary and Selfless Healer special rules. They'll have a 6+ Feel No Pain, 1 will come back from the dead each turn, and if you injure any but don't kill them, they'll be restored to full wounds again. They'll also have Ezekiel on hand as well. He has Righteous Repugnance for when 1 unit gets involved in melee. That'll allow them to reroll all hits and all wounds with those Thunderhammers, and should guarantee the death of near enough any unit in the game. For objective shenanigans, he also has Engulfing Fear to deny Obsec for a unit, and Mindworm that can make an enemy unit fight last. Just for securing a home objective or protecting characters, we also have a small Deathwing command squad thrown in there as well, each again with a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. Over to the Ravenwing, that's led by Primaris Chaplain on bike, who's been upgraded to a Master of Sanctity and casts Litanies on a 2+, and has the Mace of Redemption relic and Mantra of Strength. He's a murderous beatstick just by himself, but again he can also buff the Terminators with 4 rerolls to hit in melee. For some very mobile objectives secured, we have 3 standard Ravenwing bike squads, each with a Lightning Claw on the Sergeant for a little bit of melee threat as well. And for some mobile melter firepower, we have 3 units of attack bikes, all with a multi-melter. Depending on the opponent and how much sense it makes, they could potentially be candidates for going into strategic reserve. Perhaps the scariest aspect of the list are all those Terminators advancing up the field. With their own Obsec and Ezekiel messing around, you're going to struggle to take the primary objectives against them, and it's going to be hard to outmaneuver them too well with all those fast Obsec bikes kicking around, particularly when a bunch of them put out some very decent anti-tank fire. Finally, your last challenge for the day is a Chaos Demon list. It's mainly a monster mash list with some support. We've got an Exalted Lord of Change and 3 Exalted Keepers of Secrets charging up the board. The Lord of Change is that build that's nearly impossible to kill. He has the Aura of Mutability, which essentially amounts to a Feel No Pain type save, the Impossible Robe for a 3+ Invul save, and Incorporeal Form for -1 damage. Basically, it amounts to this murder chicken just not really being able to go down to any sort of reasonable firepower. He's going to be flying around and casting Infernal Gateway to shower the foes in mortal wounds every turn. The other 3 big threats that we have are 3 Exalted Keepers of Secrets, all with the Shining Aegis for a little bit more protection, and they'll be rolling for 2 traits on their excellent Exalted trait table, pretty much all of which is very good, but some highlights include improved invul saves and -1 to wound for ranged weapons. With their insane Locus of Swiftness, they have an average charge threat range of over 24 inches, and when they get there they've got no less than 10 damage 3 attacks on the charge. They can also smite or do some other nice psychic powers from Slanesh as well. The rest of the army is mainly to play around, annoy the enemy units and secure objectives. We've got 3 units of 3 Nurglings to put some Obsec on midfield objectives right from turn 1, and then 2 units of 5 Beasts of Nurgle to slog up the board and be ridiculously resilient to enemy fire. Each of those units has 25 wounds with toughness 5 and disgusting resilience. Then on the faster moving Slanesh side, we've also got 3 units of 10 Demonettes. They can provide a little bit more anti-horde muscle and some fast moving Obsec, and then 3 units of 2 Fiends of Slanesh. If they manage to get anywhere near enemy units in close combat, then the enemy units can't fall back from them, which could be pretty fatal if the opponent was really counting on shooting, say, your Keepers of Secrets to death. In general, with this list, you're going to have to deal with those 3 Exalted Keepers of Secrets right from turn 1, and then hopefully scrabble around to clear the very tough units off the objectives for the rest of the game. So I'll be interested to hear how you think your army would get on against these lists. Feel free to let us know down in the comments and which ones you think would be your best or worst matchups. If you do enjoy this one as well, let me know. I'm sure we could make another one with a whole bunch of different lists if we did fancy doing some other thought experiments at some point. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be trying to keep the 40k Tactics content coming pretty much every day, so subscribe or check back if you'd like to see some more videos. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page which you can find down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making these videos quite so regularly, so if you are watching quite a bit, any support is massively appreciated. I do try and have a few bonuses for people who support the channel. You get to see certain videos early each week, there's regular votes to see what sort of things come next, and there's automatic entry to the Auspex Tactics giveaways where I post out some big model kits at the start of each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.